Chapter 3. Birth, Marriage and Death in Atlantis. Once the original volunteers to this phase of Atlantis had learned how to meet their survival needs by creating community through cooperation, more souls were invited to populate the continent. They, however, needed to be birthed through the physical body and nurtured during infancy and childhood. To undertake this responsibility, couples came together in a committed, blessed union. No ring or other symbol was exchanged, for they considered no one could own or limit another in this place of free will. The union was for mutual caring, learning and comfort. At that time no one had sex outside a relationship, because the commitment of birthing and caring for the future generations was considered sacred. Before a marriage was sanctioned, a priest examined the auras of eligible couples to check that they were spiritually and emotionally compatible. This was to ensure that a baby received a balanced emotional upbringing, exposed to both masculine and feminine energy in its formative years. Throughout the universes, beings watched what was happening here. Would sex corrupt or would it remain a beautiful, transcendent experience that enriched the lives of the couple and brought them closer? Those who observed the inhabitants of Atlantis handling relationships, sexuality, birth and death with integrity, saw that it provided many challenges and a rich opportunity for learning and growth. Incarnation into a physical body was viewed as the Everest of challenges. Then, as now, souls lined up to undertake the experience. In early Atlantis, when a couple decided that they were ready for the responsibility of parenthood, they would discuss what sort of soul they were best able to serve as parents. They would then consciously communicate with the spirit of one of the volunteers who fit their criteria. The energy created in the act of lovemaking drew this particular being to them, and a spiritual commitment was then made to start the physicality of pregnancy within the womb of the mother. In current times, the same method of soul choice takes place, but the decisions are usually made outside of conscious awareness. In Atlantis, every single baby was consciously chosen, invited, welcomed and loved. Moving on. When the original 84,000 souls entered Atlantis, the vast majority were destined to become part of a couple. However, the Intergalactic Council was aware that trauma and emotional destruction within relationships had often been a problem in the earlier experiments. So this time a number of entrants came with the specific purpose of remaining single. The intention was that they would stay free, forming a nucleus of emotionally clear counselors and guides. Many of these trained as novices, the first level of priesthood, while other single adults looked after those who were orphaned. At this stage of Atlantis, people only died if they had agreed in advance to leave the experiment in order that others could experience the emotions surrounding separation and bereavement. Even in our times, death is a predetermined choice made by the soul. We still choose, consciously or unconsciously, our method of passing, often for the spiritual growth of the family and sometimes as a wake-up call for our loved ones. At other times, people decide, at a soul level, to die more slowly in a way that will give those around them a chance to adjust emotionally to their impending departure. In Atlantis, as now, many souls exited this physical plane because it was time for them to take part in another piece of light work. Perhaps the higher self of one person may have agreed to help a grandchild or great-grandchild from the spiritual realms, as they made their incarnation. Or there may have been teaching or healing work to do on another galaxy. Also, as now, there were always those who had not fulfilled their intentions on Earth and needed guidance and counseling while they are asleep. During sleep, our spirits leave our physical bodies and travel to other planes for spiritual help. They may be offered help to enable them to decide the next step on their spiritual journey, for we are all on a journey back to the Godhead. In Atlantis, as now, they did not lose someone when a person died. They had simply stepped into another room of the mansion of the infinite, and then, as now, they would meet again if they wished to. Community life. After the original phase of communal survival, the next learning was about creating family life within community. When a couple committed to a union, they built their own home and everyone helped, freely contributing their time, skills and ideas. They constructed the houses out of natural materials, wood, straw, mud and anything available in their areas. Karma was not created because no one ever gave without receiving or received without giving. This fostered selflessness, appreciation, creativity, generosity, respect and all the higher qualities required in such a community. There was no ownership. It was deemed that ownership promoted difference, separation and greed, while the cosmic experiment was designed to establish sharing, caring, trust and oneness. Everyone was encouraged to do what he or she loved best. The farmers worked together as did the furniture makers, the bakers, the cooks, the builders, seamstresses and all other skill groups. They placed their product in a collective pool to be used as needed. Money simply did not exist at this time. The first babies who incarnated were regarded with wonder and respect. They were cherished and deeply loved by everyone, for they belonged to the community. However, it was their parents who met their immediate physical and emotional needs. Because both parents and baby were telepathic, they would communicate mind to mind, and this meant that the parents automatically perceived the needs of the child. They watched for, and helped to hone, the child's latent abilities. The community helped to serve each baby's social and educational needs. When they were quite small, the children spent part of the day in a nursery, where they were cared for and helped to develop socially and spiritually by people who were chosen for their qualities of love, caring and wisdom, and their ability to teach babies and children. Trained priests helped to maintain the spiritual energy of these creches. Education and development. The priests assessed each child according to the spiritual and psychic gifts he or she brought into Atlantis, and drew out these talents. Even as babies, these new entrants were encouraged to develop and express that which they could do well. As a result, they grew up with a sense of self-worth, happiness, belonging and connection. They were nurtured so that they could grow into balanced, loving adults. This created an inclusive society where no one experienced isolation or loneliness. When they were ready, as young as 3 years of age, the children were gathered into groups for education. This took place outside, in nature, where they were encouraged to express their creativity and learn through song, drama, music, art and play. The aim was to expand their right brain, which keeps the connection to source open. Their psychic abilities were also encouraged and directed. The priesthood was made up of men and women. At the age of 7, they took the children to the temples to be taught. The classes were light and fun-filled, for the teachers realized that the young ones needed their childhood and must not be made to grow up too quickly. The first qualities to be developed within the children were awareness and respect. The youngsters learned to be in touch with everything in their environment and to watch the energies of plants, animals, people and all things, so they knew if a plant or animal needed help. They could sense the needs and feelings of all around them, and because everything was regarded as an extension of self, they knew at a cellular level that they could not hurt anything without hurting themselves. Being psychically open, they could see the energies within and around everything, right down to the subatomic level. Even the youngest child could see auras. Consequently, there were no secrets, which meant it was safe for people to keep their hearts open, so there was no guilt, shame, resentment, fear or anger. Openness, peace, love, joy, innocence and trust created safe, welcoming communities. The high priests and priestesses were given information from the Intergalactic Council about their perception of the perfect education for the children. This was passed down to the priest teachers and proved flexible enough to allow for individuality, so they continued to use these guidelines for future generations. At school, the children's spiritual and psychic gifts were not just encouraged but were carefully developed. They were taught self-discipline and elementary mind control. If, for example, a child was hungry and wanted an apple from a tree, he could simply focus on the fruit with his mind and it would float to him. This development of their psychic gifts conferred immense power and responsibility on the youngsters and helped them to grow spiritually. Because the children were safe and secure, and trusted their environment, they were able to truly relax both body and mind so that they were receptive to the cosmic information the priest was imparting to them. The priests taught telepathically so that it was easier for the pupils to absorb information. If a child found it difficult to grasp a cosmic concept, the priest would pour pure white light into his or her mind, relaxing every cell even more deeply, and then the understanding could be received and accepted more easily. Music was used in the temple to assist the children to go into a state of relaxation. While they were in trance, the Atlanteans practiced visualization. As this is one of the first steps towards manifestation, it was important that even children learned this skill. We will give you much more information about the powers they developed later in the book. Health. As part of keeping everything in balance and harmony, emotions were immediately addressed and honored, which meant that there were no underlying grievances or issues. Therefore, people were happy and healthy, and children were brought up within contented families. The Intergalactic Council was very aware of the frailties of the human body. One of the first dedicated areas within each temple was for healing. Family members would regularly visit the temples for a checkup, during which the priests would balance and realign each person's mental, emotional and spiritual bodies using sound and crystals, so that they maintained optimum health. As a result, in the earliest days, there was no illness. In the event of an accident or trauma that knocked someone off center within their aura, the priests would offer deeper healing. There was a keen emphasis on family life, and extended families loved to spend most of their time outside, picnicking together and having fun in nature. The children responded to the simplicity of life, playing round the clusters of natural, ecological homes, surrounded by greenery and trees. They also swam and frolicked in the water of streams, lakes and fountains. As the first babies grew into children, animals arrived in Atlantis to help with work, offer their produce and enhance family life. Exercise. The humming ball. This is one of the simplest and most effective ways of sending your higher energy and love to another person. You can use it to heal relationships, or to bathe someone in love, abundance, prosperity, wisdom or any other gift. It is so effective that we have known physical healing to take place when a humming ball, sent with love, was received. One young man projected a healing humming ball from a workshop to his depressed mother. Although she did not know consciously what was happening, she actually saw the ball enter her room as a golden light. The depression lifted and has never returned. Like meditations or invocations, this exercise opens you up. You always need to close down, as indicated, at the end. 1. Sit quietly, on your own or with others, and decide where you wish to send the energy and what quality you wish to send. 2. Place your hands in front of you as if they were holding a ball. 3. Ask the angels to work with you. 4. Focus on seeing the quality that you wish to send filling the ball you are holding. As you do so, hum softly and imagine a color expanding the ball. 5. When your humming ball is vibrating with the qualities and love you wish to offer, picture the person to whom you are projecting it, and imagine them receiving it. You can also mentally throw humming balls to places, situations or people you have never met. 6. Close down by touching each chakra in turn, and placing a cross or other symbol of protection that is meaningful to you, over them. Chapter 4. Animals in Atlantis. The Intergalactic Council wanted to be sure that the settlers, in their physical bodies, fully understood and honored the divinity of all things. They were pleased that people asked the plants if they could pick their fruit and, in exchange for this bounty, sang to them or cleared the weeds that choked their roots. People would even ask the permission of the weeds before they pulled them from the earth. If a branch needed to be cut from a tree, Atlanteans would first explain to the tree what they were about to do, so that it could withdraw its energy from the limb. This could then be severed without pain. They would talk to the elementals within crystals and these would gladly work with them. They asked leave from the water spirits to enter a river and in exchange were kept safe. At all times they respected and were sensitive to the vibrations of all life forms. Service animals. When the original volunteers had settled, the council arranged for animals to arrive in Atlantis. First came the service animals: horses, cows, goats, deer, sheep, bees and chickens. Their sole purpose in taking part in the experiment of Atlantis was the same as for humans. Could their spirits incarnate in a body of flesh and still maintain their divinity? Could they unconditionally love humans and each other within the confines of a physical body and the challenges of Earth? At first it was relatively easy. Humans and animals honored and served each other. People were deeply grateful to the animals for providing them with produce and in return they gave the animals food and shelter, loved them and let them be free. Cows. Cows descended from Lakuma, one of the stars around Sirius. It has a vibration much higher than we can currently tune into, which is why it is invisible to us. The cow's primary service was to offer milk. They were also learning to develop the qualities of being earthed, steady, stable, solid, reliable, and gentle, and they demonstrated a wonderful capacity for giving. They expressed extreme opposites of masculine and feminine energy, the cow being nurturing and loving, the bull, powerful and protective. In recent times, when the herds allowed mad cow disease to enter their systems, they were demonstrating to humans that we need them more than they need us. Surrendering themselves to be sacrificed on flaming funeral pyres was a way of drawing attention to this. The flames also helped to purify some of the vibrations of pain and suffering we humans have inflicted on cattle over many thousands of years. But in the early days of Atlantis, cows lived in harmony with the people, who treated them as part of the family. They gave and received true love. Horses. Horses also came from Lakuma. They are highly evolved beings and they offered themselves in supportive roles for the humans who were undertaking the Atlantis experiment. They were used as a mode of transport and were ridden without saddles or bridles. The rider would sit bareback, hold the mane of the horse for balance and directions were given telepathically. There was a huge bond of love between these beautiful creatures and humans. Horses demonstrated qualities of dignity, self-worth, honor and love, and many of them still radiate these qualities. It was not until the vibration of Atlantis started to decline that they were harnessed, saddled and ridden in races for money. Deer. These sweet, gentle animals, which also came from Lakuma, were nervous, watchful and wary. They arrived to learn about trust and they are still teaching us about trust now. If you see a deer, it suggests you need to trust more or at least look at your trust levels. Chickens. Hens came to Earth from a distant planet of another universe, which is unknown to us. Their service was to offer eggs and feathers. In the early days, all the other energies were slow, languid and peaceful. Hens offered the balance, which was liveliness, activity and quickness. Into a world of being, they demonstrated doing. They were learning to live, serve and offer themselves. Goats. Goats came to offer milk and were waste disposal experts. They incarnated from Orion, which is the spiritual university of this galaxy, and offered lessons of enlightenment. Sheep. Among the first service animals to flock here were sheep, which came from the Pleiades, offering wool, comfort and a sense of goodwill. Bees. Also from the Pleiades, bees came to learn about the sweetness of life and to bring us honey. They served to pollinate flowers and demonstrated method, order and aspects of sacred geometry. And in those early days they did not need to sting. When those animals who came in direct service to humans had settled on Earth, the Intergalactic Council sent domestic animals. Domestic animals. Dogs were all the same breed, just different colors. The nearest equivalent we have now are lurchers, in the greyhound family. Their main role was to be with children, who learned to understand about responsibility for others, as they considered the needs of their pet, and how to care for and empathize with other creatures. In turn, the dog would experience life with humans. Its purpose was to learn to nurture children and to keep them safe from accidents. When a child was born, a dog would be attracted to the child's energy and would turn up at the house. Parents would expect a dog to arrive for their child, and one day they would open the door and find it there. Every child had a dog and the average family had 3 children, so there would be at least 3 dogs in each household. Children and their dogs experienced companionship, and it was a symbiotic relationship on every level. The dog even went to school with the child. The natural lifespan of a dog was 13 to 16 years, equivalent to the childhood of its human companion. At the end of this time, the human either took a partner or moved to a single person's accommodation to train to become a priest or for another vocation. When this happened, both dog and human knew they had served each other and that their purpose together was done. Their energies would then separate, the dog would pass over and its spirit would return to its home planet of Canis Major. After the decline of Atlantis, however, humans started to breed dogs for their own selfish purposes. Cats. Cats are enlightened and independent beings. They are the one species that came to Earth so evolved that they had nothing to learn from humans, and consequently they did not need us. They came from Orion, the great spiritual planet, which is why their energy was so pure. Even today they are highly independent. In the early days, all cats were black and very Egyptian-looking. Black is the color of deep mystery and sacred arts. It is the ultimate feminine vibration. A cat went to every home to help maintain a pure energy there. In later days, their mission was to try to raise the energy in the house. Felines were vegetarian at this golden time, like all high-frequency creatures, and allowed themselves to be fed by humans. They did not need claws to catch or kill prey, but they loved to climb trees and had a great affinity with them. At the temples, people were employed specifically to look after their needs, and they were very much revered. They were used in temples because their psychic ability was so high, so they participated in rituals and ceremonies and added their energies where they were needed. Healers always had a cat to boost the power. If a crystal arrangement that was being used for healing was slightly out of alignment, the cat would adjust it, making sure the crystals offered the optimum healing. Cats were always present at deaths too. In those days the spirit often needed to be guided, so their cat traveled out of body to accompany them and make sure they did not get lost. The Magi also had cats. Hundreds of years later, when the Pure Ones first had a sense of things going wrong in Atlantis, they sent to Orion for more cats to help hold the light on Earth. In pure Atlantis, there were no entities or dark thought forms, but later, in the devolved times, cats would watch over their families and protect them from entities. They still do this, trying to guard their owners and the planet. Rabbits. The third domestic animal was the rabbit. Like dogs, they were protectors of children, as well as their playmates. Dogs took their jobs as guardians very seriously, and with their loving, no-nonsense approach, helped the child to develop its masculine nature. In balance, the rabbit offered feminine energy, and was light, fun and fluffy. A child went to its rabbit for comfort if it felt hurt, for they helped to heal the heart. Dogs and rabbits provided the protector and caretaker roles for the children, who loved them both dearly. The dog went to school with his charge and the rabbit maintained the energy at home. Like cats, the rabbits came from Orion, and it was not unusual to see cats and rabbits conversing, as they knew they came from the same place but had been allocated different jobs. The cats were regal and knew they were boss, whereas rabbits were practical and helpful. Other creatures. Pigs. Pigs also arrived in the second wave, from the Pleiades. They came as part of the ecological balance to eat the leftovers. Like hens, they were quick and active at that time, and were also valued for their intelligence and wisdom. They did not live as part of the household, but offered friendship, love and care to humans. Birds. A whole variety of birds incarnated from Sirius to learn about mastering gravity and to maintain their inherent qualities, while fettered by a physical body. They came to teach serenity, dignity and calmness, and to act as a reminder of freedom to earthbound beings. Brightly colored birds constantly delighted the people with their song, their beautiful plumage and message of freedom. Swans were especially admired and honored in Atlantis for their composure, regal qualities and peace. They have manifestly demonstrated their life purpose and even now are considered royal birds. All pure white creatures vibrate at a very high frequency. Fish. Fish volunteered to come to Earth from the constellation Pisces, and their task was ecological. They were to keep the seas and rivers clean. Red squirrels. Red squirrels were beautiful, highly evolved and wise creatures from Orion, bringing freedom and a sense of joy and liveliness. Rats and mice. These were not sent in golden times, but eventually, as Atlantis devolved, rats and mice arrived to clear rubbish on the planet. Rats were more aggressive and scavenged, whereas the mice had a gentler energy that took advantage of situations that presented themselves. Dolphins. Dolphins, the wise ones of the planet, brought their high energy, wisdom and knowledge from Sirius. They are the keepers of cosmic knowledge, holding the information like a computer. In the days of telepathy, humans turned to them for knowledge, much as we use the internet today. The dolphins incarnated as teachers. They were the psychics, high priests and priestesses of the oceans, who maintained the vibration of the waters. The people of Atlantis built huge pools for the dolphins and swam with them, telepathically receiving guidance, information and wisdom. When Atlantis began to fall, the Intergalactic Council decided to retract the sacred ancient knowledge and wisdom, and downloaded the information into the dolphins. When Atlantis finally disintegrated, certain of those who orchestrated its destruction took dolphin bodies. Every detail of what happened was recorded, and the Intergalactic Council used these dolphins as a memory base to access why and how Atlantis fell. The Sphinx holds all the information pertaining to our planet as a whole, not just Atlantis, of all that has ever been, is, and will be. It has always done so. The angel dolphins and master crystal skull, discussed in Chapter 25, maintain all the wisdom of Atlantis. But the Council wanted to be absolutely certain that the data would be preserved, and so individual files were sent out to be preserved by different beings. Different kinds of dolphins each keep 1/12 of the information, as do the individual crystal skulls. Animals from other experiments. Other animals were not included in Atlantis. Elephants, giraffes and camels, for example, incarnated into Africa as part of a different experiment, and crocodiles and marsupials came into Australia as part of a galactic test there. Lions, tigers, leopards and other large felines were also part of a different venture on Earth and were even more highly evolved and regal than the black cats. When Atlantis was declining, the Intergalactic Council sent more powerful help to the continent. They brought the big cats through the energy biosphere surrounding the experiment, so that their incredible frequency could be used. Later, in Egypt, the big cats worked with the pharaohs, who were not as pure as the Atlanteans and needed greater support. Astral entities. Mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are not divine creatures, they are astral entities. In low-frequency times, when humans were intensely irritated, they projected their anger and frustration powerfully out into the ethers. This eventually became a thought form, which materialized into matter, and the mosquito was born. Like all dark forces, mosquitoes continue to serve us by rousing our irritation or by being attracted to us when we are annoyed. Flies. Flies are also astral entities, created by the buzzing, angry thought forms of humans. They are the downside of a human's power to co-create with the divine. Once Atlantis fell, the world started opening up and people traveled. The ecological principles that had been developed in pure Atlantis were no longer followed. Waste became a problem, and with it, flies spread and proliferated. For 1,500 years during the Golden Age of Atlantis, animals and people were friends. They loved and honored each other. There was no fear or danger, many animals were part of the family. Even when humans and animals started to eat flesh, this was always done by a divine contract. For example, the hungry person would telepathically contact the herd, and the weakest member would offer itself as food. This sacrifice made him sacred and was part of the exchange between the two. This principle is still applied in the Native American tribes, who took their wisdom from Atlantis. They will mentally ask an animal for permission before they hunt it. In order to bring back the energy of pure Atlantis, we must learn to honor animals and become friends with them once more. Exercise. Communicating with an animal. If you have a dog, cat or horse, even a mouse or rabbit, practice this exercise with it. If not, your neighbor may have a friendly domestic pet. Sometimes birds will come to talk to you, and there are always horses and cows in the fields. The more of a rapport you already have with an animal, the easier it will be to connect. However, the most important thing is the love, empathy and good intention that you radiate in your aura. It is easier to practice this exercise if your animal is in your physical presence, but if it is not, send an absent communication to it. 1. Sit quietly with your animal. Stroke it and whisper to it if you wish to, but this is not essential. 2. Imagine pink light coming from your heart center and surrounding you. Then let it enfold the animal. 3. mentally tell the animal that you love it and wish to communicate with it. 4. When you feel you have established a rapport, telepathically ask it a question. 5. Wait in a receptive mode for an answer to drop into your mind. This will usually come as a thought, which you may think is your own. The more you practice this, the more quickly you will be able to differentiate your own thoughts from the responses of the animal. 6. Sometimes the flash of response will drop in later, even the next day, so relax and enjoy this exercise without expectation or pressure. Chapter 5. Homes and Leisure. Houses. In the golden times, the inhabitants of Atlantis, including the priests, were home-loving, family-orientated people. Their houses were simple, round or oblong and built in natural materials. Feng shui, or geomancy, was practiced, and so everything was curved or rounded, which was believed to be more harmonious to the human spirit and a better channel for the energy of the universe. Soft shapes also honored the feminine principles of gentleness, caring and inclusiveness. Each family had their own home, but work was communal. In the earliest days when everyone was single, each house was a basic one-room dwelling, for the immediate aim was to provide everyone with shelter. During the next phase, they considered longer-term needs. At this point, they started to build two-story homes in which the living space was downstairs and the bedrooms were upstairs. The sleeping rooms were partitioned areas without doors. Some people reached the upper rooms by teleportation, though not everyone could do this. Most preferred to climb up, since there were always ladders, and people tended to do as much as they possibly could physically, because they realized they were here to experience life in a body. Furthermore, it takes more energy to teleport than to walk up steps. There were no bathrooms. Everyone bathed together in open-air pools and saunas in the warm climate. Nothing was wasted either. In the early years, communal toilets outside allowed human waste to be used for manure. Despite their amazing technological prowess and knowledge, life was simple, always ecological and natural. Decoration. Decoration was also simple, tending to be only a picture or mural on the downstairs walls created by artists for the householder. They painted animals, inspirational scenes from nature or abstract pictures in beautiful colors with a high, spiritual energy. All things were designed to maintain the divine frequency. Because color affects us so profoundly, different ones were carefully chosen and applied. For example, red was used in work areas, while rooms used for creativity were orange, as were children's spaces. Appropriate colors were used for various age groups. For peace, and to raise the frequency, temples were painted in blue, mauve and green, while inspiration was induced with magenta. The only ornaments in the early days were from crystals that were programmed to light up in the evenings, or from glowing metals. Furnishings. Almost all furniture and utensils were handmade and carved with love so that they radiated high vibrations into the atmosphere. Because people loved making things, objects were rarely manifest from the ethers, even by those who had the power to do so freely. They found it much more satisfying to fashion their own creations. Every item radiates energy. That which is mass-produced, in an environment filled with fear or frustration, releases dark energy, which affects all who touch it. In Atlantis, at this time every single object was produced with love and considered to be sacred. Beds were made of wooden boards, slightly elevated, with a soft cover, usually woven from cotton. The Atlanteans were intensely practical. They would never hurt an animal, but when it died naturally they would use the skins, and soft cushions to sit on were filled with chicken feathers or wool from sheep. The homes all had fires inside them, needed less for warmth than for cooking. Women usually undertook this nurturing role, for they had chosen to incarnate in a female body to learn about and express their feminine energy. Currently, women still choose a female incarnation for the same reason. In those gentle times, however, women were treated as spiritual beings, whose homemaking skills were appreciated and valued. Furthermore, a woman's talents in all creative and artistic areas were honored and encouraged. She was considered equal to a man, just different, and was definitely not a little woman at home. She also had certain powers, which made life easier. For instance, a woman could click her fingers and levitate a utensil into her hand from the other side of the room. Outdoor life. Most gardens also had a fire with which people would cook. Families and friends loved to sit out under the stars, around the open flames, and tell stories or sing together. They were very sociable people, and a key to their contentment was frequent celebration. They honored and gave thanks for birthdays, a good harvest, the full moon, special rains, or anything that felt relevant. Naturally, they all ate together and blessed their food. They understood intuitively that blessed food is supercharged with divine energy. They did not need alcohol or drugs during the earlier period, for their happy spirits came from within. Mood-altering substances were sought only when the vibration of Atlantis started to fall. Because nature and the outdoors were so important to them, Atlanteans appreciated their gardens, which were beautiful and natural. They loved wild flowers, but did not cultivate them. Nor were their lawns manicured in the early days, although they were kept in check and grazed by sheep or goats. Their surroundings were enriched with beautifully carved pieces of wood or special stones. Moving water played an important role in their well-being, and many had pools and fountains in their homes or gardens. They would spend time by them, meditating and simply being, relaxing to the sound and movement of water. Later, swimming pools were plentiful in the towns. Temples also had running water or fountains in their central areas of worship. Atlanteans knew that everything, including stones, crystals, trees, plants and animals, is a materialization of divine life force. All is God. Therefore, they honored and accepted every single thing as having an important role in their lives. Because these simple people recognized the divine in all things, crystals, plants and creatures responded to them and worked with them. For example, they could communicate with the elemental life force within a tree and ask it to grow into a shape that would shade or shelter them. In the Aquarian Age, we are trying to get back to being God. The Atlanteans knew they were God. The Atlanteans kept their frequency high by relaxing, enjoying their leisure and being sociable. They were light, fun-filled, happy people. Families lived together, and as more generations came in, they would extend their homes or at least live in the same area. They loved the company of others because they exchanged energy, so they invited other family groups to their homes to share simple food. They enlivened these meetings with music, storytelling, acting and dancing, all of which were popular pastimes at gatherings. Because their right brains were developed and their memory banks expanded, they had enormous capacity to remember stories in intricate detail. Their pleasures were innocent. They picked berries together as a family, and enjoyed walking alone or with others in nature and picnicking by rivers. They all swam like fish and especially loved to swim with their friends, the dolphins, in the sea or in huge pools that they had constructed for them. Or they would make rafts, or rig up sails on a boat to catch the wind. They also played games together, variations of soccer, catch or baseball, with the emphasis on simple fun. Society and culture. Atlanteans loved their homes and families as well as their animals, which were always part of the household and considered to be important family members. Women would sit outside in a cluster, creating pottery, weaving or sewing together. Clothing was simple. They used wool, cotton and silk, dyeing the cloth with natural plant or shell dyes. People were dressed in tunics, which were often purple, dyed with the plentiful murex seashells. Their only decoration would be a crystal attuned to higher consciousness. The early settlers soon started to make music. They began with wind instruments, like flutes and pipes made from reeds and animal bones. Nothing was ever assumed or taken for granted, so they would ask an animal for permission to use its bones before it died. Of course, all animals died of natural causes in these early days. Drums, cymbals and bells were very popular from the first. Soon people fashioned metal tubes of different lengths and fastened them together to look like several panpipes in a row. They would hit the individual pipes with a stick covered in something soft, and this created beautiful notes. The metals came from another planet, so we cannot recreate these instruments or sounds nowadays. Atlanteans also made melodies with hanging crystals. Lastly, they developed the skills to make stringed instruments such as harps. The people loved to sing or chant together and to listen to music, to allow the vibrations to flow through their bodies. One composition might enable a person to experience power, another, more sensual, calming notes. A concert would be dedicated to specific music, for instance sacred chanting or uplifting chords. They built vast sound chambers with extraordinary acoustics where concerts could be performed and people gathered for the social event as well as the opportunity to be inspired. They also created sound chambers within temples for healing. All levels and tastes of music were catered to, but there was no heavy metal. Children were not off balance then as they are now, so there was no call for it. It was only in later Atlantis, as the frequency became discordant and people needed to express their disharmony, that rock-type music became popular. Creativity and art was valued and encouraged. Art exhibitions were very popular, as artists wanted to spread the energy of their creations for people to experience. Shapes, colors and compositions within a painting radiate specific vibrations, and the painters of early Atlantis wished to express the glory of creation. In due course, huge exhibition halls were built with several floors, each floor dedicated to a particular frequency. All the paintings, sculptures, music and lighting on a particular floor would resonate to the same pulse. The people who desired that tone would come to bathe in it. They also met their friends at the exhibitions, as the social aspects of the events were valued. The people loved to keep their physical bodies fit and in due course challenged each other to races. This was always done for fun and to extend themselves. Competition was never undertaken from ego, but was a medium for developing excellence. Eventually, one town would invite another to a match and each center would take turns to host these, which were the forerunner of the Olympic Games, as we know them today. It was a time of celebration and friendship, and an opportunity to expand physical boundaries. Horses raced each other too. They ran without riders, not because they were trained to, but because they wanted to. Atlanteans learned that simplicity was one of the keys to keeping their energy pure. Their daily life was spent in a combination of work, social and family life, contemplation, leisure and thanksgiving. Exercise. Expressing your creativity. 1. Decide on a quality that you would like to express. It might be tranquility, joy, aspiration or anything else you might choose. 2. Find a medium with which you would like to create. It could be paint or crayons, sand, clay, wood, music, or something completely different. 3. Sit in quiet contemplation for a few moments. Feel the quality inside you and focus on it. What color is it? What sound does it make? How does it feel? Is it thick, thin, silky, rough, or sensuous? Does it express an element, water, fire, air, earth, ethers? How does it smell and taste? What shape does it have? What does it look like? 4. Now express it with your medium. This does not have to be a work of genius. No one else need see it. It is simply an expression of a divine aspect of yourself. The more often you do this exercise, the more deeply you will absorb the quality and be able to express it in your life. Exercise. Celebrating. Every day is a celebration. What can you celebrate today? How are you going to do it? Celebrate your health by lighting a candle and giving thanks. Celebrate the beauty of the flowers by saying a few words of thanks. Celebrate a beautiful sunset by opening your arms in a gesture of expansion. Chapter 6. Farming. Up to the decline of Atlantis, everyone was vegetarian, although they accepted the animals' offerings, such as wool, milk, feathers, or eggs. They believed that the eating of flesh would lower their frequency and shut down their psychic abilities, so their food was derived from plants, nuts, seeds, berries, eggs, and dairy. At the beginning, all plants were eaten raw, but in the evolution of the community they began to cook them lightly. Working with nature. Because their spiritual lives were aligned to the natural world, people respected and honored the rhythms and needs of nature. So the farmers planted and harvested appropriately for each type of plant, according to the phases of the moon. The Atlanteans also ate in tune with the seasons. They realized that the human body is in harmony with all of nature, so correct food was available at the perfect timing for the body's needs. The same applied to location. The food growing in the North Islands was exactly attuned to the requirements of the people living there, as was that on the South Islands. These principles are still divinely correct at the current time. Local food in season is imbued with perfect nutrients for the people living in that place. In the Golden Age this was understood, and the concept of transporting God-given food somewhere else was inconceivable. Scientists have now discovered that the amino acids in soy differ according to the latitude at which they are grown and correspond to the nutritional needs of animals and humans in each area. The farmers placed companion plants together for their mutual support and protection, and watched and listened to their plants, telepathically receiving information from them. The mighty Thoth, later known as Hermes Trismegistus, taught the early settlers that there is a harmony and correspondence in every living thing in the universe, including the movement of planets, tides and currents, animals, humans, plants, crystals, everything. All the cosmos responds to certain harmonies and combinations of notes, which are tuned to the same scale. This means that appropriate tunes and rhythms, synchronized to the cellular structure of a human, will heal that person. The correct notes will also help plants to grow healthy and abundant. Atlanteans learned that plants respond to certain types of music, and so they sang and chanted to them, using a harmonious, loving vibration to encourage their yield. It was also considered perfectly natural to sit among their vegetables and talk to them. This allowed a flow of prana or life force to be exchanged between humans and nature. We discuss sound healing in more detail later. Now, when someone has a special empathy with flowers, which grow abundantly for him, we say he has a green thumb. These people inevitably talk to their plants. Love is a cosmic force, which affects humans, plants, rocks and Gaia herself. In modern times, many experiments have been undertaken that have shown that plants shrivel and die when bombarded with fractured rock music. In contrast, they grow lush and prolific when played classical music, especially Baroque or sacred Indian music. Crystals for plants. Around the plants, the Atlanteans placed crystals that automatically vibrated with them, which helped them to grow and kept them healthy. Other plants that were abundant and tended to take over were surrounded by specifically programmed quartz crystals to persuade them to remain contained. Dendritic agate enhanced the yield of crops and was used to maintain the health of houseplants. It also stabilized the vortices within the Earth's energy field. Bogie stones are formed of dense sand, with an outer layer containing iron particles and sand so tightly compacted that they feel like iron to the touch. The particular vibration they emanate is beneficial to crops and plants, and so these stones were arranged among the foliage. There are two types of bogie stones, one smooth, which carries feminine energy, and the other with protrusions, which holds the masculine energy. They were used in perfect balance. Lithium quartz was plentiful and frequently used to heal plants and animals. It also purifies water. This was not necessary in the Golden Age, but later this crystal was placed in pools and drinking water. It is helpful in current times to place a piece of lithium quartz in a jug or glass of bottled, tap or filtered water for purification. If the water is put into a blue glass and placed in sunlight, this can charge up the water with divine energy. Remember, if you pour some of this sacred liquid into a local river or pool, it will act homeopathically, thus helping to purify and raise the vibration of the larger body of water. Green tourmaline was popular because it has the power to heal all plants and maintain the energy of the garden. This was partly because it has a strong connection with the devas, the nature spirits that look after trees, plants, rivers, mountains and all aspects of nature. The farmers were very aware of the elves, fairies, gnomes, salamanders, undines and other nature spirits, and would cooperate with them. As a result of working in harmony with nature, the farmers produced food that was rich in nourishment in a way that is beyond our comprehension now. It contained prana, or divine life force, so that very little food was needed. Cultivation. Plants and vegetables were tended by specialist farmers, though the whole community automatically helped with harvesting. Everything was placed in storage, where families helped themselves freely to whatever they needed. Their diet was partly corn-based, but they grew potatoes and all sorts of vegetables, nuts and fruits. Even in the earliest days, the Atlanteans used a form of hydroponics, which ensured that the plants had the right amount of moisture and light. They created covered stands, at waist level, in which to grow their seedlings, providing perfect conditions. These looked similar to our current greenhouses, but they were made of neither polythene nor glass. Instead, they used a highly effective material, which we no longer have the technology to produce. The 5 islands that made up Golden Atlantis were spread over a considerable area. There was a huge distance from north to south, which meant there were climate differences. In the north they cultivated grapes, blueberries, boysenberries, cherries and nuts, but it was too warm for apples. Further south they grew oranges, lemons, limes, grapefruit and figs, while in the most southern island mangoes, pineapples, coconuts, papayas and pomegranates were prolific. Atlanteans loved to make a variety of fruit drinks, especially from pomegranates. Other specialists, who loved animals, cared for the cattle, sheep and other creatures. These farmers all worked together within the communities, supporting each other and enjoying their roles. They honored the animals and valued the food they offered. They would never assume the right to take milk or wool, but would always ask the animal for it and be grateful when it was given. Dedicated beekeepers cared for the bees and created simple hives, asking permission to take the honey offered. Trees. Trees are the lungs of the planet, which balance the atmosphere. They are very benevolent and spread love. People sense this, which is why, even in our cynical times, people love to sit under trees or walk in the woods. Trees also have a role as keepers of ancient wisdom, for they store the history and the wisdom of the land. A tree could tell you what has happened to the soil around it since time began. If there is pollution, an infestation of insects or weather changes, they will hold the information. The trees of Atlantis also held the data on the experiment so that the Intergalactic Council could use the information encoded within them to understand what went wrong and learn from it. A variety of timber grew on the different islands. There were no oak, ash, elm, beech, chestnut, larch, or sycamore trees, which grow in current northern climes. But palm, eucalyptus, maple, willow, poplar, olive, pine, sandalwood, cypress, and some others that are now extinct, abounded. The Atlanteans particularly loved trees. They would sit and lean against their trunks to restore their equilibrium and energy. And they danced around them at their ceremonies. In the golden times, the soil was rich and fertile. The weather was mild and rainfall was perfect, controlled by the energy biodome that covered Atlantis. Plants, grown in tune with universal energies, were full of flavor and goodness. Consequently, people had to expend very little time or energy to meet their basic nourishment needs. Furthermore, they had no material desires to amass goods or to prove themselves better than another, so they spent their time in creative pursuits: drawing, painting, sculpting, or fashioning items of beauty. They loved to play music or relax in nature and have fun with their family, friends, and animals. It is when we become busy and spend too much time thinking that we disconnect from our true selves. The early Atlanteans lived peaceful, contemplative, harmonious lives, which kept their connections to the spiritual world pure and their right brains open. They also spent all day outside, in nature, at one with all that is, since nature and the divine are connected. Plants, like people, respond to positive and negative emotions and vibrations, whether it be through music, thought, or being spoken to harshly or lovingly. Try the following exercise and see for yourself what happens. Exercise. Using the power of love and hate. 1. Take 2 identical pots and plant seeds in each one, in similar soil. 2. Write "love, peace," and "thanks" on a piece of paper, and attach this to one pot. 3. Write "hate," "no good," "horrible" on another piece of paper and attach it to the second pot. 4. Water each pot in the same way. As you do so, tell the seeds in the first pot that you love them, that they are doing well. Visualize them growing abundantly and tell them how pleased you are with them. Explain that you are proud of them. But tell the seeds in the second pot that they are no good, that you hate them, and that they are miserable, horrible plants and don't deserve to do well. 5. Watch the results.